Greetings to everyone tuning in. We're at Encounters 2021, and I'm here in the home of my comrade editor-in-chief, Khalid Shamis, at the after the premiere of your latest film, Colonel Stray Dogs. It's also obviously Youth Day today, momentous day in the history of this country, and in many ways, I think there's some links to your film in terms of, as a young person, constructing or investigating a relationship with your own family's history, which is obviously broader. But I'm very happy to be here. My name is Gumedze, a friend of Khalid, and he's asked me to do this Q&A with him. And yeah, we're going to chat a little bit about this film, maybe a little bit about some of your other films, particularly maybe Imam and I. Sure. As there's some relationships between them. And just in terms of the Q&A, I'll start off with a few questions, but please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them as well. But yeah, Khalid, I mean, congratulations on getting this film done.
Thank you.
First, I mean, it's a massive achievement. Such a massive work. I mean, I know you did.
Labor of love and
labor,
you know?
Yeah.
Politics of labor.
And you, if I remember correctly, you said this film took you about 10 years.
Yeah, from the seed of wanting to make it until it takes time. You know, there are moments where nothing happens. But yeah, the whole process of making it. But it's always been a story in my life, right?
Sure.
Growing up, and my younger brother actually said when he saw the film, he said, "I've been waiting all my life." You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, the film took 10 years, but it's a lifelong thing.
So I'm really interested in, I mean, that 10 years is such a long process for anyone in their life, but also to hold like a project, you know, and I'm really interested in that process. And obviously there's so much in that process, which is you, I think, investigating some of your family history, figuring out maybe some of your own relationship with parts of your family's history. But can you speak about how, I mean, you said from the time you thought about working on as a project, that's 10 years ago, how, as it's turned out in this final kind of product, how different is it as you imagined it, or is it similar?
Yeah, it took some different iterations, you know, ideas around how to tell the story or how to approach it. And initially, I wanted to. It was during 2011 when Libya was in this kind of that tumultuous state, and Gaddafi was, you know, the window for him to leave was opening. And so then I was thinking, right, maybe I can make a film about this. You know, there's an interesting film here. I know there's archive, you know, in my dad's office. So I know that's there. And my dad's still alive, right? A lot of the guys, some of the guys who were with him in the front died, were killed, were assassinated. So in a way, we were one of the fortunate ones of that group. And so I thought I could tell the story. What I wanted to do was to follow him back to Libya, to go with him, if he did go, to be with him in our house in Croydon, packing his suitcase and flying to Libya, and being with him and filming that process and arriving. And I thought that would be the construct for the film. And that's the end, right? When we arrive and he's greeted by his family. And during that process, being at the airport, this place of exile for everyone, I would go back in and out of history, right? So I had that kind of constraint. I thought it would be a nice idea, you know, but then he just left. He left without even telling anyone. He told my mum.
Left England.
Yeah. When Gaddafi was chased out of Tripoli, right? He got on like the next plane to Tunisia on his own, and then he made his way to Tripoli. and I was here in Cape Town, and I was upset.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, for two reasons. One, because, you know, I can't make the film in the way I want to make it, but really because we've been following all these years with this kind of love of Libya, or this kind of journey to Libya, and we kind of weren't allowed, or didn't, you know,
Had you discussed with your father up until that point that this was your plan to do that with him?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I just thought it would. I didn't know Gaddafi would be out.
Right.
You know, it was an idea.
Yes.
I didn't approach anyone for funding, so I didn't write anything down even. I just thought, right, if it happens, then we do this. Because I was sure that, you know, we would all go together.
Right.
Isn't it? After all those years.
Yes.
Doesn't it make sense?
The return to the native land.
Yeah. At the same time, his journey. It was his journey. Part of his journey he had to complete also.
Sure. I mean, speaking about journeys, one of my favorite, I guess, motifs in this film, but also in Imam and I, is this kind of these shots of you walking, or these shots of you moving, you know. And
that's the London swagger.
Yeah, it's the London swagger, isn't it, mate? But like, I'm really interested in that as a filmic choice, but also more broadly, metaphorically or symbolically, like situating yourself in the middle of the film in a certain way, in a kind of cameo sort of way, but there's also a kind of humor and a quirkiness, I think, to how you show up in the film. And so not just in the walking, but in I mean, we were speaking with some other friends about how, you know, your face is in the beginning of a shot and you're fixing your dad's microphone at some stage. And there's, I guess one gets a certain sense of your centrality to the film in that sense, and it's your story. Well, that it's part of your story. Can you speak about, I guess the importance of yourself in the film, maybe like actually visually, but also
as a character. Well, I mean, I work on many films as an editor, right? And often I always have this question with directors, is like, what about you? Do we see you? Are you going to be in there? And not necessarily that you have to always be there, but there has to be something to say, I exist, right? I mean, with this film, it's quite clear. I mean, it's my dad, and kind of I'm telling the story. So I'm not going to. I can't really hide from putting myself in. And I think the lesson I learned from the Imam film is to treat myself as a character, rather than, I don't like the look of myself or the sound of my voice. You know, that's usually the first reaction. So I've gotten used to seeing myself or treating myself as a character in the construction of, in the making of the film, in the editing. So I don't think I could not be on the frame, but I'm not always there. So
sure.
Kind of,
around.
It's a way in, isn't it? It's like I'm the observer who's integral to the story, who starts to interact, and so helps the viewer also to relate.
Right. I mean, I think there's something very like there's something just even thinking about some of the shots of you and different members of your family having these conversations around. I'm thinking about when you're sitting with your mom at the table and you're asking questions which you can see are asking around a place that is not necessarily very comfortable, potentially, and there's like a sort of tension in some of those scenes, but an intimate tension that I think like many people have a relationship with. So I think I really like that about like there's so not just as you as a character, but you as figuring out a relationship with family.
Yeah,
I really like that. There's a question that's come from an an anonymous attendee. You'll have to forgive us as we adapt to the 21st century Zoom life. The question goes as follows. How much of the archived footage did you access from your father's collection? Did you find any other footage or information about the history that surprised you?
Okay, yeah, it's a good one because I think there's about 60% of the film is archive in that traditional way we understand archive. And of that, I accessed maybe 80% of that from my dad's archive, which includes the tape cassettes, but it's all of that VHS stuff that tells the story of the 80s and the 90s, right. Anything in the news, anything related to Libya. There's also the archive of the training camps that was shot by front members. A front member.
That was in your dad's collection as well?
No, but I contacted him and got it off him. And then, did you find any other footage that surprised me? Yeah, I mean, the stuff, all the interrogations, those public executions, I knew they existed and I knew that they were done, but I never really saw them.
Yeah.
And they're available on YouTube.
It's wild.
Wow. Some of the stuff, some of the interrogations I got from a Libyan who had some of that Libya TV stuff.
Yeah.
And what surprised me, what surprised me most was stuff like interviews from Saif al-Gaddafi when he exposes the hypocrisy of the relationship with the West and sanctions and what it all means and how to get out of them. So and Gaddafi himself, that kind of stuff, where he fends off questions with the joke also. It's kind of like my relationship with my dad.
Right.
And so some of that stuff surprised me. The safe stuff surprised. There is archive that exists. I definitely know that exists, that is held by Human Rights Watch that I haven't had access to.
Do you have any sense of what that stuff is about?
No, some of it, glimpses of it. Okay, but I don't know. So I would like to be surprised by what's in that at some point when we're allowed to see what we should be allowed to see.
Right. So that was that footage was appropriated from.
In 2011, Human Rights Watch sent in a team into Libya. Okay. And one group were told about an office in Benghazi, in one of Gaddafi's compounds, that held some material. So they went in there and they found lots of documents and Betamax tapes and photos. There's a film about it. They made a short film for The Guardian. And they extracted all this stuff. So I only know what I've seen on the 10-minute film that was made, but there must be much more.
Sure. Khalid, I wonder if you can speak. I know we've spoken in other conversations around the film and also over dinner about your mother in the film, and I mean, I think probably everyone who watches the film, one of the lines that really sticks with everyone is that you were my revolution. And I guess, can you speak about your mom's relationship to this film, this process? And I don't know, I mean, not necessarily to open up around.
It's a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
But look, if you know my old film,
yes,
Imam, then you know my mum comes from a history of a family where of anti-apartheid struggle, and her father was killed in detention here in '69, and he was the catalyst to take her to London to study, and then she didn't see him again. The following year, he was pronounced dead, and as well as having this kind of political father who was in her life, who was this political figure, she also came with the understanding that the man, you don't question what the man does, right? because her mum was like, Imam's doing whatever he's doing, as long as he's here for dinner, you know, then it's all good. That kind of thing. And so I think she carried that through with my dad, because then she met my dad soon after. And my dad had heard of Imam Haroon, who was killed in Cape Town, and a few years prior to their meeting. And I think that carried through. And so she also met this political figure, or someone who was involved politically of homeland and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So my mum brings, you know, she links that film and this film, but also, you know, me to my dad.
Sure.
Yeah. So she holds a lot of, for me, she holds the, you know, the belly of the film.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm one of the things I'm struck by in terms of the feeling of the film. I mean, there's multiple different kind of emotions, but in terms of your orientation towards your family in particular, there's a questioning, but there's this very kind of, I find it quite a generous mode of questioning. And I think there's moments where, you know, there's kind of, it feels like there's a questioning of your dad of like, where were you? What were you doing? Like, what was, but that seems to come from a place of generosity rather than a whole range of other feelings or places that could come from.
Or fear also.
Yeah.
Of the father.
And was there quite a journey for you in terms of moving through a lot of different ways of telling that kind of story?
Of being able to ask my dad those questions.
Yeah, and the place from which that came.
Yeah, sure. I think it took a while. I mean, there's lots of stuff that we shot. There's lots of these, you know, they're not really interviews, they're more conversations, right? But we shot lots of them. And it took a while for me to be able to be more comfortable with him, and for him to be more open, I think. Even in the film, the first time you see us in the office, we're standing, right?
Yeah.
And he opens the document, and I'm standing, he's sitting down. And by the end of the film, we're both sitting, and we're kind of quite relaxed. But there is this very slow sense of kind of us being more comfortable with each other, or more allowing, I think. And that's happened in real life, I think, in our relationship. And in many ways, the film is an excuse to have a conversation with my dad, you know, about that life of his. You know? Yeah.
That's I see a question from Riyadh.
Comrade.
What's up, Riyadh? The journey. This is a quote. The journey was a long one. Oh no, the quote is Riyadh. The journey was a long one, made over many years. What sparked it, and what were the most difficult moments? There's a naivety approach to the politics. Why did you choose that approach, given your personal history when the liberation struggle? Another great film, well done. I think there's some more creative grammatical use there, but
I mean, these things you got to hear in real life, isn't it?
Yeah.
The journey was, made over many years.
What sparked it? What are some of the most?
Okay, so we break it down. The difficult what sparked it was that Gaddafi could, that my dad could go back home.
Yeah.
Right. I lived my whole life with him kind of looking out the window and thinking about Libya, right, or dreaming of Libya. So when this opportunity that he could go back, to me as a filmmaker, I'm like, okay, let's do this, right? And I know the archive exists because I recorded it often, and so that was kind of clear. So you set out on the path, right? You commit to it, and then it took 10 years, and the perseverance you have. And I think if I wasn't his son, or if I was coming from another point of view, 5, 6 years into it, with all the rejections that come with applications and funding, maybe I would have said, okay, let's call it. You know? So the difficult moments, there were some difficult moments in terms of, I guess it's funding. The most difficult for me was part of the editing stage. I wanted to not edit this film. I was kind of quite clear with myself I want to sit back and not just to say I'm the director, but to have the I think the luxury that I afford directors in the edit is that you can look and you can trust that your material is being held and things are being constructed, and you can look around without having to press. I find myself always pressing buttons, right? Editing. And so I wanted that. I was adamant. I want to step back and I don't want to edit the film. And I knew it would be challenging. The problem with that is that I wouldn't trust anyone else also, right?
Right.
And so it's something I wanted to overcome myself. But there was a process where I then had to get into the edit. Right? I had to tackle it. And that was tough, I think. Just overcoming that and just getting into it and thinking, right, now I'm going to do it myself.
Sure.
But also fulfilling, you know, playing and having that luxury of being able to construct it the way I want to construct it. So it was more like the hard things were to do with the politics of filmmaking, right? The funding, all the rejections. You know, this kind of film, you get some money early on from some funders, and then if you keep going back, like 2014, 2013, 14, 15, we got the bulk of our money. And then by 2018, 2019, you go back to the funder, you're like, we need a bit more money, can you help us? Then it has this, you know, what Stephen, producer, he says, you know, sometimes this film has a bad smell about it. And people are like, come on guys, we gave you all that money, finish the film now, right? So you get that sense that the funders are like, finish it. It's been 7 years now, 8 years. What's the problem?
Sure.
Right. So that's tough to get all those rejections. But that also talks about how films are made in the continent here and how they're treated by, often the funding comes from the West.
Right.
So that kind of relationship is a different conversation, but it also talks to that problematic.
Right.
So, the second part of the question,
there's a naivety approach to the politics. Why do you choose that approach given your personal history? What I think he's saying, why not go deeper into politics? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean,
I don't know. Time and space, right? I mean, the film it does a lot of different things. I think it's not just politics; it's family as well, right? It's about reconciling. It's about an understanding of the history. It's about playing with an aesthetic as well. So I think that kind of question is for these discussions, right? To open up, to have those discussions about politics and the place of Gaddafi in our kind of in the African cosmos and all of that. I don't think I want to make a film about that. I'd rather have the conversation.
So there's the next question. How has the process of making the film affected you?
Well, my white hairs are more than before. You know, I had that nice bush, curly bush. That's gone. That era has gone. Next, Christy Evans.
Yes, that's who I want to ask about.
Shamila. Oh, my mum. Yeah, sweet. Did you next one? Did you think about including your other family members? Yeah, they're in the film. More in the film. Did you think about including your other family members more in the film? I did, but I also didn't. Because there's 3 others, right? 3 siblings, and if I start now opening them up, it becomes a 2-hour film, and I don't want to put you through that. And I think it's enough. Sure. Like my brother, my older brother, has these poems that he recites beautifully through the film. My younger brother has that moment where we talk about his birth, which I think is quite significant. I interviewed him. I did sit down and interview him. And after he saw the film, he said, you know, where am I at? Because it was a nice interview. He says stuff and we have a nice conversation. But if I did that with him, I had to do it with the others, right? And it's an interview, so it's a sit-down interview, which the film is not that kind of feeling. And then my sister filmed all of that stuff during Revolution on her phone. And it's a significant part of the film. Without that, the film kind of falls away. So for me, they have a very strong part in the film. So yeah, I think.
There's a lot of questions coming in now.
Una Pereira.
Hi Khalid, did your relationship with your dad change while you were making the documentary or after you finished it? If it did, how?
Yeah, definitely we got closer. Definitely got closer. He always referred to the film as our film. How's our film doing? I hope he's watching. How's our film doing, Khalid? You know? And so that's good. And so our relationship got closer, I think, especially since 2005. I've been living here, and he's been in the UK. All my immediate family is in the UK. So also a way of maintaining a relationship with them, you know, the making of the film. Got closer.
I was deeply moved by the parallel of vulnerability and relationships and identity in the background of a civil war, death and loss. I'm so curious about your internal relationship to Libya, to regime, to the everyday and mundane wish to live and be free.
Wow.
Do you feel freed by your father's desire to see a free Libya?
Do you feel free by your father's desire to see a free Libya? Do I feel freed?
Or maybe what is, how do you relate to your father's desire to see Libya freed?
Yeah, I relate to him and I sympathize. And I think I understand. But I did go there, and I wouldn't, you know, I don't really feel like it's my home in a way, right? Because it's very, very different place. I don't speak Arabic. I don't speak Libyan kind of dialect. Also. And I haven't spent enough time there to really own it, you know. So probably not. I'm probably not freed by his desire to see a free Libya. But I'm with him. I'm supporting him. You know, I love him. So I'm not like.
So there's another question from Liani Mazdorp. Congratulations on a powerful, beautifully crafted film. Thanks for sharing the story with the world. I found it interesting that Imam and I was as much a journey to your own identity as the history of your grandfather. But in the Colonel Stray Dogs, you focus on your grandfather's story.
Father's story.
Sorry, your father's story, and don't explicitly include that much about how it affected you and formed you. Was this intentional?
How? Oh, I see. Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting because Imam, I open with this kind of wanting to find myself through this man in my family, and who kind of knew himself. But it's a different relationship one has with their grandfather who they never met, as opposed to the father who they know, right? So I don't. There was a section there were iterations of the film where there were sections that were more about my own journey as a Londoner, especially in the 90s, and wanting to kind of split from my family in a way and do my own thing and understand the world outside of this microcosm, which didn't make it. So there are things there that, I guess it's also time, you know, it's an economy, a film, right? It's like, it's a numbers game at some point. So there wasn't time or space for that. Okay, thanks, Leanne. Mickey, Redling Ace.
Well done, Khalid. A beautiful, profound film and a long labor of love, respect. What did your dad say about the film?
He's very happy about it. He's very proud of it. And one of the major things was that he was very happy that he wasn't painted as the man who freed Libya, right? Which he was kind of afraid of. He was afraid of his colleagues seeing that, other Libyans saying, oh, you know, Ashura's son is making a film about him. You know, he's trying to big him up, basically. And the film doesn't do that. kind of tries to be honest in a way. So he was happy about that. And he was happy that it was put together in kind of a professional way.
He was surprised that it woven the public and the private.
Yes, he was surprised that it was so personal. Right? He didn't think it would be this, especially what I say at the beginning, right? My dad. And yeah, and he was surprised how the personal and the political were quite. He's he comes from a journalistic background, the kind of person who will watch Al Jazeera and who will watch CNN to get the news, and he'll watch those documentaries in that space.
Sure.
So he would have kind of expected that kind of telling,
right?
And it's not that.
Yes, it's a very different film. So I mean, that to me is one of the really interesting things about the film, in the sense that if you think about an Al Jazeera style documentary, that kind of narrative is almost the backdrop to what's going on in the film, right? Which is interesting, also considering your response to Riyad's question. But it's almost
more fact.
It's a
feeling.
Yeah. So it's like the film on a certain level is about a very political, historical process, but the film is almost not. Or like what the immediate reception is not that. Which is a very particular kind of decision, right?
Sure. It's more feeling. But once you get the facts in line, right, the chronology, the main things that happen, then you can start playing around with, not playing, but inserting and trying to understand feelings around family and those things, which Al Jazeera kind of style wouldn't touch.
Right.
Christy Evans.
Did she really not know what was going on?
My mum.
Because of gender/cultural norms, or because it was coping mechanism, both, neither, because she had seen it play out in her own family here in SA?
Yeah, all of the above, Christy, all of the above. I mean, she knew very well, I think, a lot of it. She might not have known details, like what X amount of money was going to who, right? But she knew who the players were, and she knew when there were moments of danger and when there weren't. And she knew when to hold us kind of as a family, and when to kind of be a bit freer. But her mission was to feed us and clothe us and make sure we're at school and all that kind of stuff. Loved. And she had her own big cosmology of friends, right, and networks in London. She was kind of very connected in other ways. There's a whole South African diaspora that was there in the 80s that she was very connected to. So she also busied herself. Right? But she knew to some extent what was going on, but not all the details. Catherine Mayberg. Guyan. Guyan is Catherine's son.
Okay, Guyan here. Thank you for the movie, Khalid. I really enjoyed the combination of your own personal narrative with your father and your father's relationship with Gaddafi. Having the documentation of your own personal history alongside of Libya. But on a separate theme, what was your intention with the music? What were your influences?
Yeah, the music is not interesting because there's a few things there. I'd always, I like working with Tiago, and I always wanted him to make the music for the film. On one level, like I'm happy to just kind of throw the film at him and say whatever you want to do with it. But I had some ideas. Secondly, I think this kind of film, the initial tendency from a filmmaker might be, I'm going to use Arab music or Libyan music, right, to kind of paint it. And I didn't want to do that. I think the initial kind of the obvious feeling, I don't want to do. Also in the film, one of the only notes I really gave to Tiago was that we're moving through this, aesthetically in the film, we're moving through VHS aesthetic or film aesthetic, VHS, and then a digital satellite TV into kind of iPhones, right?
Yeah.
Phone aesthetic. So I wanted to get a sense of moving through time in a way. So it's got this 80s kind of sound early on, which carries through. And then Tiago he has a very nuanced understanding of film language, right? He is a director, really, right? And so he really understands emotion and where to, and layering and stuff like that. So there's lots going on in the music that is really his kind of, his working.
Right.
So there's a couple more questions, and I think we are over time. So we'll take what's here, and then we can wrap after that.
Leanne Brady.
Could you tell us more about the home archive? 1, why were you filming it? 2, what struggles did you have getting the rights from the BBC to use the footage?
Okay. Why were you filming it? Why was I filming the home archive when we were kids, I'm assuming? Well, it exists, the film, that stuff exists, and I wanted to show us then. In London, that there's a strong differentiation, I hope, in the film between this dream of Libya, which is kind of like desert, sandy, dry place, also quite green and rich, and this very leafy, green London suburb where we grew up. So that kind of helped to paint it. And then
the politics around the
archive and the BBC. Yeah, it's a whole conversation. It's a big conversation, I think, and I'm writing something about it. I'm writing a paper about it. So we'll park that if that's okay, Leanne.
Down with the Imperialist.
Yeah.
Simon Wood. 2011, a film about your grandfather. 2021, a film about your dad. 2031, a film about
you, Simon. I'm gonna make a film about you. Okay, next. We have
an attendee who wants to ask a question live. Can we make time for that? Absolutely. Should we do that now?
Can do that, yeah. Or let's go through.
Or let's go through them and then. Okay.
Julia Kane.
Bravo, Khalid. Such a wonderful, complex, layered film. So happy it is here at Encounters. I expect it has a long life ahead. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Respect.
That's just a big up.
Yavini Naidu.
DJ Heat. Well done. Moving and mature. Nuanced yet focused. What was the arms deal provocation about?
What was the arms deal provocation with my mum? I'm not sure the question.
Is it about when you're asking your dad about opening his suitcase and he's got the kind of catalog of the latest machine guns at the time?
Yeah. So there's that one document that's a brochure for submachine guns in my dad's briefcase under his desk. And so that was an obvious kind of thing, like, tell me about this, right? Yeah. My dad. But then there's lots of documents, and as we're kind of looking through, there's a moment in the film where I kind of brush past these pamphlets of those pistols, right? With the silencers. And he's like, no, don't look at that. And I'm like, no, I'm going to look at this now. What's this? Oh, no, it's not mine necessarily. And then he kind of brushes off. So, that's that.
Yeah.
And I said earlier in 007 joke, right? So I have to look at the silencer.
Cool. So I think, Dylan gives his kudos on another banger.
Thanks, Dylan. Big up, Dylan.
Peace. Big up yourself,
shout out
Dylan.
To Shukri Adam as well. He asked me to give him a shout. That's a shout.
And big up the Fulan gang.
Fulan.
Should we give Riyad a chance to raise the question?
Let's bring in Riyad. Please. Here he is.
Hey.
Where's the camera, Riyad?
I do, yeah. I don't know, the camera doesn't seem to want to go on. Can you hear me?
You don't need a camera.
Okay.
Films.
Yeah, I mean, Khalid, I mean, I grew up with the Green Book. I mean, it was a lovely little book in many ways, and Gaddafi's legacy is very contradictory. Your grandfather himself probably received in some way or the other some part of the Gaddafi support to the PAC and the ANC. He supported liberation struggles around the world.
Okay.
I wondered why you didn't sort of deal with that. I mean, did you? I mean, I'm sure your father. I mean, I got a sense that your father was supportive of some of the stuff. I mean, we used to hear reports about how everybody in Libya's got a house and this great welfare state and blah blah blah. All the oil money was being used to to help the people. We also found out of late about how he enriched himself tremendously and his network and so on. So yeah, I understand why this why you chose to do what you do. That's the strength of film. The personal, the emotive. But I suppose my questions to you. Why did you? Sorry, someone's trying to call me there. Why did you? Why did you leave that sort of line out? I mean, about your own feelings towards Gaddafi, or
Yeah, sure.
or your father's sort of contradictory feelings towards Gaddafi's role and legacy and so on.
Yeah, I mean,
Can I? So my closing question was going to be along a similar line.
Yeah.
But well, not necessarily similar line, but is in a similar space. It was to ask if do you understand your film to be an intervention in the memory of Gaddafi, and if so, what is that intervention? And but please don't not answer Riyad's.
Well, I definitely think,
well.
Rihad, thanks, Rihad. I definitely think it's a conversation we should have, right? Definitely now more than ever is this, what he left, because it's the same kind of, you hear the same things in Libya now that you heard a decade ago here about how things, you're probably still hearing it now. Things used to be better back in the old days, right? So people are starting to say that in Libya. But the idea that we heard about Gaddafi's great welfare state was also part of his own propaganda, because So I read the Green Book as well. I've read it a couple of times, and it's kind of interesting in parts, but it is a mess. It's a real mess of ideas, and it's a kind of mishmash of ramblings, right? It is, in some ways, the ramblings of a madman. And he came in, right? It's true. Read it, if you read it again, some of it doesn't really make sense. And so he came in with these ideas, these kind of Nasserite socialist ideas that were, and with his handsome face and his kind of, middle finger up to the West, which I appreciate as well. And I do appreciate the idea of like a gold standard in Africa, and moving away from using the dollar and uniting Africa. But uniting for what though? For he was wanting to unite to become the king of Africa, right? Head of Africa. And I mean, what would that mean? Okay, it doesn't just mean that we're against the West or dollar, but he wanted to become the pharaoh, right? His own pharaoh, and that in itself is problematic, and we've got to kind of question it. Would he be the ideal leader for us on the continent anyway? And he definitely played into the whole pantomime of the West versus him, Reagan and Thatcher, who were also these kind of puppet political kind of pageantry figures and he played into that role, and he kind of took it on, and he embraced it, and he used it in many ways. I respect that he supported the IRA and obviously supported the PLO. But, you know, he tried to kill my dad and he could have killed us, and he killed people that we know. And I know those families who were highly traumatized, still are, right? And I really feel for them. And so, you know, where do you put yourself? It's complex. Of course it's complex. It's more complex than he was making out that it was just him against the West, right? Or he was trying to unite Africa. And you've got to question those things, right? Because behind it all, there's all this corruption or whatever. So my own feelings, yeah, I appreciate some of his ideas that were never fulfilled or drawn out. And I don't appreciate some of his ideas that he did fulfill and that he wrote about. Yeah. So, yeah, it's complex. I think it's a conversation we should have. And I also don't know the whole story. Yeah. I'm obviously coming from a bias because Gaddafi was always the enemy for us. Not because we were in England and we were on the side of Thatcher. Because Thatcher was also, my dad would say things about Thatcher, like she's the enemy too. And Reagan, of course. I mean, he's the buffoon of the West, right? He was. So it's not like my dad was opposed to Gaddafi, but pro-Thatcher and Reagan. It was also quite complex.
But there is a relationship there with
totally.
like the CIA. And
There's all those machinations of politics, and it's a kind of intricate web of, you know, you stab one guy and the next one stabbing you in the back. And that's what I think in some parts of the film, that interview with Saif al-Gaddafi, who talks about this, the signing of the document to release the sanctions, but not accepting responsibility for Lockerbie, right? So that talks to the hypocrisy of these political relationships. But I think Gaddafi, definitely, we have to have those conversations.
Khalid, thank you for this conversation. I mean, thanks, Riyad.
Thank you. Great, mate.
I mean, I think it's a good place to end the conversation because it feels like it's very alive and continuing. And I think if there is an intervention that a lot of work can make, it's in introducing or reintroducing conversations in a new light. So maybe we end there at the beginning of many other conversations.
Thank you. Thank you, Asha. Thank you, Encounters.